You're my daughter, Mira." The words cut through the crystal chandeliers in 500 stunned guests like a blade. "I'm your father, and I've spent 18 years searching for the woman I never stopped loving." A single tear rolls down the cheek of the most powerful man in the room. Cameras flash, phones rise. The ballroom holds its breath. Have you ever watched someone's entire world shatter and rebuild itself in the space of one heartbeat? Have you ever felt your heart recognize the man who destroyed you the moment his eyes found yours across a crowded room after almost 2 decades? Have you ever realized the child you raised alone just forced the love of your life to his knees in front of the entire world? Tonight, one abandoned pregnant wife, one secret daughter, and one billionaire who thought money could bury his biggest mistake are about to discover that some loves refuse to stay buried. If you've ever believed love can survive anything, stay with me, because what happens next will leave you breathless. Welcome back, my beautiful story family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of this one. Drop a heart in the comments if you're ready for a love that burns for 18 years and refuses to die. Let's begin. 3:47 a.m. The phone screen glowed like a cold moon in the darkness of their tiny studio apartment. Natasha Bergman sat frozen on the edge of the Murphy bed, staring at the email that had just turned her carefully guarded world upside down. Subject: Congratulations, Pinnacle Capital Summit Speaker Invitation. Host: Dominic Ashford, CEO, Ashford Industries. 18 years, 7 months, and 14 days since she had last seen that name in print. 18 years since she had sworn she would never let it hurt her again. Beside her, Mira slept peacefully, one arm flung above her head, curls wild against the pillow, completely unaware that in 2 weeks she would walk straight into the eye of the storm that had created her. Natasha's fingers trembled as she set the phone down and padded barefoot to their cramped kitchenette. The coffee maker hissed to life, the only sound in a city that never really slept. She wrapped both hands around the warm mug and let the memories she had buried for almost 2 decades rise like steam. She was 20 again, working the breakfast shift at the campus diner, the lunch shift at the bookstore, and the night shift cleaning lecture halls so she could afford tuition. Exhausted, proud, and stupidly, beautifully in love with the boy who used to wait for her outside the economics building with 2 paper cups of terrible vending machine coffee and a smile that made the world quiet. Dominic Ashford, 23, heir to an empire, dark hair that fell into his eyes when he was thinking, a voice like smoke and honey that could talk her into staying up until dawn debating capitalism, poetry, and whether love was stronger than bloodlines. Their first kiss tasted like rain and reckless hope. He had cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks, and promised, "I'm going to build you a life where you never have to choose between your dreams and dinner again, Natasha. I swear it." For 9 perfect months, she believed him. They mapped their future on napkins in 24-hour diners. Graduation, marriage, 2 kids, a house with a porch swing, and a promise that they would use his privilege to fix everything broken in the world. Then the 2 pink lines appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. She had rehearsed how she would tell him 100 times. Imagine the joy in his eyes, the way he would spin her around their tiny apartment, laughing, already planning names. But Thursday morning, he was gone. Apartment empty, phone dead, socials erased, only a note in his handwriting left on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry, they gave me no choice. Forget me, live beautifully." 3 days later, the lawyers came. Italian suits, expensive watches, cold eyes. "Miss Bergman, any attempt at contact will be treated as extortion. The Ashford family protects its own." She had stood in that doorway, one hand cradling the tiny life no one else knew about yet, and made a vow. They would never touch her daughter. They would never make Mira feel small the way they had made her feel small. So Natasha disappeared, transferred schools, changed cities, worked until her hands bled and her body screamed. Raised a little girl who never once asked for a father because her mother loved her hard enough for 2. And now, 18 years later, that little girl was about to stand on a stage paid for by the man who had vanished. Natasha looked over at Mira, still sleeping, and felt the old fury mix with something softer, something dangerous. Pride, terror, and the tiniest, most treacherous spark of curiosity. What would Dominic see when he looked at the daughter he never knew he had? Would he recognize his own fire in her eyes? Would he finally understand what he had thrown away? The coffee had gone cold in her hands. In 2 weeks, the past was coming for all of them. And this time, Natasha would not be the one left holding the pieces. Mira stirred in her sleep, murmuring something Natasha couldn't catch. Natasha crossed the room, brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead, and pressed a kiss there, soft as forgiveness. "Whatever happens," she whispered into the dark, "I've got you. I've always got you." But even as she said it, her heart was already racing toward a ballroom where destiny had apparently decided 18 years was long enough. If your heart is already aching for Natasha, type "she deserved better" in the comments right now. And keep watching, because the night of the summit is about to change everything. Hit that like button so this story finds someone else who needs to believe in fierce, unbreakable love. Morning light slipped through the cracked blinds like thin gold blades across the studio floor. "Mom, why are you staring at me like I grew a second head?" Mira sat up in bed, rubbing sleep from those dark, intense eyes. His eyes. And Natasha realized she'd been watching her daughter for a full minute without speaking. "You got in," Natasha finally said, voice catching. "Pinnacle Capital Summit, 2 weeks, black tie, 15-minute slot in front of every investor who matters." Mira's mouth fell open, then snapped shut, then opened again. "Mom, that's the one hosted by Ashford Industries, right?" Natasha only nodded. The name hung between them like smoke. Mira was already reaching for her laptop, curls bouncing as she folded her legs beneath her. "This is insane. These people fund companies that change the world. I have to rewrite my entire pitch, and we need a dress. And we'll figure the dress out," Natasha cut in gently. "We always do." But Mira had already stopped listening, fingers flying across the keys, the same focused fire Natasha had once watched in another pair of hands 18 years ago. Natasha turned away so her daughter wouldn't see the tears threatening to spill, because the memories were no longer steam now. They were a flood. March, 18 years earlier. She had waited for Dominic outside the lecture hall after his finance exam, 2 decaf coffees in her hands because caffeine suddenly made her nauseous. She had practiced the words all morning. "Dominic, we're having a baby. We're going to be a family." He never came out. She waited 2 hours. Texted. Called. Nothing. By midnight, she was at his apartment, pounding on the door with a terror she couldn't name. The neighbor finally cracked the door. "He's gone, Natasha. Movers came this afternoon. Said he was transferring schools. Left you this." The envelope was thick, expensive paper. Inside, a single handwritten page. Natasha could still recite every word. "Nat, my father found out about us. About everything. They've made it clear. If I don't walk away now, they'll destroy you. Your scholarships, your future, everything you've worked for. I'm being sent to London tonight. New school, new life. They're watching you. If you try to find me, they'll make good on every threat. I'm a coward. I know that now. But I love you too much to let them hurt you. Forget me. Be brilliant without me. I'll love you until I die. D." She had read it on the hallway floor, knees giving out, one hand pressed to the tiny curve of her belly that no one else knew about yet. 3 days later, the lawyers came. 2 men in charcoal suits, standing in her dorm doorway like undertakers. "Miss Bergman, the Ashford family is prepared to be generous if you disappear quietly. Tuition, housing, whatever you need, on the condition you never speak Dominic's name again, particularly in connection with any future children." She had stared at them, 20 years old, broke, terrified, and already fiercely in love with the life growing inside her. "Tell them to keep their money," she had said, voice shaking but unbroken. "My baby will never need anything from people who buy silence." She slammed the door in their faces. That night she packed 1 duffel bag, withdrew the $847 from her savings account, and took the first Greyhound out of the city. She never looked back. Until now. Back in the studio, Mira's excited voice snapped her into the present. "Mom, look. The keynote speaker last year got a $7 million investment on the spot. $7 million. Can you imagine what we could do with that?" Natasha forced a smile that felt like glass. "I can imagine," she said softly, because she could. She could imagine Mira standing under those chandeliers in a dress they'd sewn themselves, commanding a room full of millionaires with the same fire that once made a privileged boy fall hopelessly in love with a diner waitress. She could imagine Dominic in the front row, watching his daughter shine, never knowing the girl on stage was the living proof of every promise he'd broken. And for one dangerous second, Natasha wondered what it would feel like to watch him finally understand exactly what his fear had cost him. "Mom?" Mira's voice softened. "You okay? You look far away." Natasha crossed the room and pulled her daughter into a hug that was really for herself. "I'm perfect," she whispered into those wild curls. "Because I have you." Mira laughed, hugging back. "We're doing this, Mom. Together, like always. Together, like always." Natasha closed her eyes and held tighter. In 2 weeks, together would mean something none of them were ready for. If you're already rooting for Natasha and Mira to walk into that ballroom and own it, drop a fire emoji in the comments right now. And keep watching. Because the night of the summit is coming, and hearts are about to break wide open. The Grand Meridian Ballroom glittered like a jewelry box someone had shaken and left open. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors. Champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes made of money. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. Every smile cost a fortune. Natasha stepped through the archway, holding Mira's hand so tightly her knuckles went white. Mira wore the black dress they had found for $29 at the thrift store on 14th Street. Natasha had stayed up 3 nights letting out seams, adding subtle silver threading along the neckline so it caught the light just enough to look intentional. On her daughter it looked like $1 million, because Mira wore it like armor. "You belong here," Natasha whispered for the 10th time. "I know, Mom," Mira whispered back, squeezing once. "But I still feel like I snuck in through the service entrance." They both laughed, soft and nervous, and then the laugh died in Natasha's throat, because there he was. Dominic Ashford stood beside the bar, one hand in the pocket of a midnight black tuxedo that fit him like it had been woven onto his body. 41 looked cruelly good on him, silver threading through the dark hair at his temples, the same sharp jaw, the same broad shoulders that once carried her books and her dreams and her entire heart. He was laughing at something a silver-haired investor said, but the laugh never reached his eyes. Those eyes were older now, sadder, hollow in a way that made Natasha's chest ache with something she refused to name. 18 years, and her body still recognized him before her mind gave permission. He turned as if some invisible string tugged him, and their eyes locked across 50 feet of marble and money and time. The room blurred. For one endless second there was no ballroom, no investors, no past or future. There was only the boy who once kissed her in the rain, and the girl who had believed every promise he ever made. His lips parted, just slightly. Natasha felt the floor tilt beneath her heels. "Mom?" Mira's voice came from very far away. "You're crushing my hand." Natasha forced herself to blink, to breathe, to remember who she was now. A woman who had survived him. A mother who had built an empire out of love and thrift store dresses in sheer spite. She lifted her chin and met his stare without flinching. Dominic's face changed. Shock, recognition, something raw and desperate that looked almost like pain. He took one involuntary step forward. Natasha tightened her grip on Mira's hand and turned them both toward the reception table, breaking the spell. But her heart was pounding so hard she was sure the entire room could hear it. "Mira Bergman and Natasha Bergman," she told the coordinator with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The woman beamed. "You're 4th on the program, Miss Bergman. Mr. Ashford is dying to meet all our young visionaries tonight. He's been talking about this lineup for weeks." Natasha's smile never wavered. "I'm sure he has." Mira glanced at her, sensing the shift in temperature. "Mom, that man at the bar, the one staring like he just saw a ghost. That's him, isn't it? Dominic Ashford." Natasha exhaled slowly. "Yes." Mira followed her gaze, curious now. "He's ridiculously good-looking for an old guy." Natasha almost laughed. "Almost. He always was." Mira studied him for another moment, then shrugged. "He looks sad." The observation landed like a stone in still water. Sad. Natasha had spent 18 years being furious. She had never once allowed herself to imagine he might be sad. Across the room, Dominic was still staring, the conversation around him forgotten. A beautiful blonde in emerald silk touched his arm, possessive, familiar, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes never left Natasha. Then the blonde followed his gaze, saw where it landed, and her perfect red mouth tightened. Natasha recognized the look. Territory. Warning. The same look the lawyers had worn all those years ago. Some things never changed. Mira tugged her forward. "Come on. Let's go steal some of those fancy shrimp things before I have to give the speech that decides my entire future." Natasha let herself be pulled into the crowd, but she felt Dominic's gaze on her back like a hand between her shoulder blades. He looked sad. Good, she told herself. Let him look. Tonight wasn't about him. Tonight was about the daughter he'd never deserved, stepping into the spotlight he'd once promised her mother would never have to earn alone. Natasha straightened her spine, slipped her arm through Mira's, and walked deeper into the glittering cage of the lion's den. She had survived worse than a room full of rich strangers and one ghost from her past. Tonight, she would watch her daughter shine. And if Dominic Ashford's world cracked open when he finally saw what he had thrown away, well, Natasha smiled, small and fierce and finally free. That would simply be justice. If you felt that stare across the ballroom in your soul, drop a purple heart in the comments right now. We're only getting started. The presentation hasn't even begun, and hearts are about to explode. Keep watching. You cannot look away now. The lights dimmed to a single spotlight. The MC's voice rolled through the ballroom like velvet thunder. Please welcome the future we've all been waiting for. Founder and CEO of Bergman Consulting, Mira Bergman. 500 heads turned. Natasha stood near the center aisle, hands clasped so tightly her nails left crescents in her palms. Then Mira stepped onto the stage, and the air left Dominic Ashford's lungs in one brutal rush. He had been watching the entrance all night, waiting for this name, telling himself he was simply curious about the young speakers he'd personally selected. But the moment Mira walked into the light, everything stopped. She was breathtaking. Tall and poised, with Natasha's graceful neck and his own stubborn jaw. Her curls were tamed into an elegant twist that made her look 25 instead of 18. The black dress caught every shard of light and threw it back like defiance. And her eyes. God, those eyes. Dominic's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble. No one noticed. Every gaze was locked on the girl commanding the stage. Mira smiled, small and real, and began. Good evening. I'm here to tell you the difference between surviving and building something that outlives you. Her voice was steady, warm, edged with steel. The same cadence Dominic heard in his own boardroom when he closed 9-figure deals. But then she kept talking. I grew up in a studio apartment smaller than this stage. I watched my mother work 3 jobs so I could eat while she skipped meals. I learned negotiation by watching her sweet-talk landlords who wanted to evict us. I learned resilience every time she came home with bleeding feet and still helped me with homework. Each sentence landed like a fist against Dominic's sternum. He couldn't breathe. Because he knew that apartment. He had once carried Natasha across its threshold, laughing, promising her the world. He knew those bleeding feet. He had kissed them after her shifts, swearing she would never have to stand that long again. And he knew, God help him, he knew the exact moment this girl had been conceived. April 15th. 37 weeks after the morning he disappeared, Dominic's knees buckled. He caught himself on the bar, knuckles white. Simone's voice cut through the fog. Dominic, what the hell is wrong with you? He couldn't answer. On stage, Mira kept speaking. Success isn't profit margins. It's the single mother who can finally quit her second job because we helped her turn her side hustle into a business. It's the kid who sees someone who looks like her in rooms like this and realizes the world might actually have space for her dreams. The audience was silent, utterly captivated. But Dominic was drowning, because every word Mira spoke was a mirror. His strategic mind in her delivery, his intensity in her passion, Natasha's heart in every story she told. He looked wildly toward the center aisle and found Natasha watching her daughter with shining eyes and a smile that held 18 years of pride and pain. Their gazes collided. Natasha saw the exact second realization slammed into him. Her smile faltered. Dominic's vision blurred with tears he didn't bother to hide. Simone grabbed his arm harder. Dominic, people are staring. He shook her off without looking. On stage, Mira reached her final slide. So invest in me if you want returns. But invest in us because you believe the daughter of a waitress who never finished her degree on time can still change the world. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Cheers. Cameras flashing. Dominic was already moving. Pushing past millionaires and champagne trays, past Simone's furious protests, past 18 years of regret that suddenly felt like quicksand. He had to reach her, had to touch her, had to fall to his knees and beg the universe for one fragment of the life he'd thrown away. Mira stepped off the stage into a swarm of investors, laughing and shaking hands, and glowing with the kind of light that only comes when you've spent your whole life preparing for one moment. Dominic was 10 feet away when Mira turned, and their eyes met for the first time. Time fractured, father and daughter, face to face. Mira's smile faltered, replaced by confusion. Something electric passed between them. Recognition neither of them understood yet. Dominic stopped breathing entirely. Because she was perfect. She was his. And he had missed every single second of her becoming this miracle. Natasha appeared at Mira's side like a shield, one hand on her daughter's elbow, eyes locked on Dominic with a warning sharp enough to cut. He didn't care. He took one more step forward, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "Mira," he said, and her name tasted like salvation and damnation all at once. Then louder, desperate, broken. "Mira." The crowd around them began to quiet, sensing something bigger than business was happening. Simone's voice rose behind him, shrill. "Dominic, stop this right now." But he was already reaching out, palm open, begging, and Mira, brilliant, fearless Mira, tilted her head and looked straight into the eyes of the father she had never known existed. If your heart just stopped with Dominic's, type "I can't breathe" in the comments right now. We're one part away from the moment that changes everything forever. Don't you dare stop watching. The circle of investors parted like curtains. Dominic stood 3 feet from Mira, close enough to see the tiny freckle on her left cheek that he suddenly remembered kissing on Natasha the night they conceived her. His hand still hung in the air, trembling. Mira looked at the outstretched hand, then up into his tear-streaked face. "Mr. Ashford." Her voice was gentle, confused. "Are you all right?" The question broke him. "No," he whispered. "I haven't been all right for 18 years. A hush fell. Phones rose. Someone gasped. Natasha tried to step between them. "Dominic, don't," but Mira's eyes flicked to her mother, sharp as glass. "Mom, why is the host of this summit crying and staring at me like I'm a ghost?" Dominic couldn't wait another second. He dropped to one knee, right there on the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Ballroom, in front of 500 of the most powerful people in the country. "Mira," he said, voice raw, "I need you to listen to me for 30 seconds. Then you can hate me for the rest of your life if you want." Gasps rippled outward. Simone's voice cracked behind him. "Dominic, get up! You're embarrassing yourself." He ignored her. Mira's arms folded across her chest, protective, but she didn't move away. Dominic looked only at his daughter. "April 15th, he said. "You were born April 15th, weren't you?" Mira went very still. Natasha's hand flew to her mouth. Dominic's voice shook harder. 37 weeks after the last time I saw your mother. 37 weeks after I let my family rip me away from the only woman I have ever loved." Mira's eyes, his eyes, widened. The room was so quiet you could hear champagne bubbles dying. Dominic looked up at Natasha now, tears falling freely. "I looked for you," he rasped. "For years. Private investigators, hacked records, every favor I could call in. They told me you'd taken money to disappear. I believed them because it was easier than admitting I was too weak to fight for you." Natasha was crying too, silently, shoulders shaking. Dominic turned back to Mira. "I didn't know, baby girl. I didn't know you existed. If I had God, I would have burned their entire empire to the ground to get to you both." Mira's lips parted. No sound came out. A reporter in the back started live streaming. Dominic rose slowly, never breaking eye contact with his daughter. "I am so proud of you," he said, voice cracking on every word. "Everything you just said on that stage, every fire in you, every ounce of grace, you got that from your mother. You became this miracle in spite of me. And I will spend the rest of my life begging you to let me earn the right to be your father." Mira took one step back, then another. Her voice came out small, shattered. "Mom, is he?" Natasha couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming. Mira looked at Dominic again, really looked. And then, in front of every camera, every investor, every gossip who would replay this moment a million times, Mira Bergman did the last thing anyone expected. She walked straight into her father's arms. Dominic caught her like she was made of glass and stardust, folding her into the hug he had waited 18 years, 7 months and 14 days to give. He buried his face in her curls and sobbed great, broken sounds that belonged to a man who had just been handed back his soul. Mira's arms came around him slowly, then clutched tight as if she was afraid he would vanish again. Natasha stood frozen, watching the two people she loved most in the world hold each other for the first time. The ballroom exploded. Cameras. Shouts. Simone screaming something about lawsuits. But inside that embrace, there was only the sound of a family finding its missing piece. Mira pulled back just enough to look up at him, eyes blazing through tears. "If you ever leave her again," she whispered, loud enough for the microphones to catch, "I will destroy you myself." Dominic laughed through his tears. Understood. Then Mira turned, walked straight to Natasha, and pulled her into the hug too. 3 bodies. 1 heartbeat. The cameras went wild. And somewhere in the chaos, Dominic Ashford looked at the love of his life over their daughter's shoulder and mouthed the words he should have said 18 years ago. "I'm here. I'm yours. Forgive me." Natasha's answer was a sob that sounded exactly like yes. "If you're crying with them right now, I need you to type family in the comments. We're not done. The healing is just beginning. One final part left: redemption, reunion, and the love that refused to die. Don't move. Don't blink. Keep watching." 3 months later, the garden smelled like jasmine and fresh beginnings. Natasha stood barefoot in the kitchen of the house Dominic had bought, not as a bribe, but as a promise. Sunlight poured through wide windows, painting gold across hardwood floors that had never known struggle. She wore one of his white dress shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair still messy from sleep and from the way he had kissed her awake an hour ago. Dominic appeared in the doorway, barefoot too, wearing only gray sweatpants and the softest smile she had ever seen on him. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, crossing the room in 3 strides. He didn't ask permission anymore. He simply wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pressed his lips to the curve of her neck, and breathed her in like oxygen after 18 years underwater. Natasha leaned back into him, eyes fluttering shut. "Coffee?" she asked. "Already made," he answered against her skin. "But I'd rather have you." His hands slid beneath the shirt, palms warm against her stomach, and she felt that familiar spark ignite low and slow. "Mira's at her 9 o'clock lecture," she whispered. Dominic's answering growl vibrated through her spine. "Then we have exactly 73 minutes. He spun her, lifted her onto the counter the same way he had the first morning they moved in, and kissed her until the past dissolved into nothing but the taste of him now. Clothes disappeared between laughter and gasps. The kitchen island became sacred ground. They moved together with the certainty of people who had lost everything once and would never risk it again. Afterward, they stayed tangled on the wide porch swing, wrapped in one blanket, watching the garden wake up. Dominic traced lazy circles on her bare shoulder. "I asked again last night," he said quietly. "You said you needed time. I'm asking again today." Natasha turned to look at him. Really look. The silver at his temples, the laugh lines she had put back on his face, the way his eyes never left hers anymore, like she might disappear if he blinked. She took his left hand, slid the simple platinum band she had chosen herself onto his finger, and whispered, "Yes, Dominic Ashford, I will marry you. Not because you bought us a house, not because you walked away from boardrooms to drive Mira to campus at 7 a.m., but because every single day for the last 3 months you have shown up exactly where you promised you would. Because you earned this." His eyes filled so fast it stole her breath. He kissed her ring finger, then her palm, then her lips soft, reverent, infinite. "Partners," he vowed. "Equals. Always." The front door burst open. "Seriously? It is 10 in the morning." Mira's voice rang out, equal parts disgust and delight. She appeared on the porch in ripped jeans and an oversized Bergman Consulting hoodie, curls wild, cheeks flushed from the autumn air. Natasha laughed into Dominic's neck. "We're on the swing, baby. Clothes are mostly on." "Barely," Mira muttered, but she was grinning. Dominic opened one arm without letting go of Natasha. "Get over here, kid." Mira rolled her eyes, then launched herself into the space between them. The swing creaked under the sudden weight of all 3 of them, but it held. They sat there, father, mother, daughter, tangled under one blanket like they had done this every morning of their lives instead of just the last 93 days. Mira rested her head on Dominic's shoulder. On the gesture so natural now, it broke Natasha's heart in the best way. "I got the Series A term sheet," Mira said casually. $22 million. They want me to stay CEO and keep my name on the door." Dominic's arm tightened around her. "Proud doesn't cover it." Mira turned to Natasha. "Mom, they also offered you a seat on the board. Paid. Full voting rights. They said they've never seen a CFO who can stretch a dollar like you can stretch a dream." Natasha laughed through fresh tears. Tell them I'll think about it. Mira smirked. I already told them yes. You're welcome. Dominic kissed the top of Mira's head, then Natasha's temple. 6 months later, they married in that same garden, small, barefoot, laughing. Mira walked Natasha down the aisle while Dominic waited under fairy lights, crying before she even reached him. A year after that, he formally adopted Mira. She kept Bergman for the world, added Ashford for the family. The judge cried. The bailiff asked for a selfie. Their foundation, Bergman Ashford, funded scholarships for single mothers and first-generation dreamers. Mira's company soared past $1 billion valuation before she turned 21. And every single night, no matter where in the world they were, Dominic and Natasha fell asleep tangled together, whispering the same words into the dark. Thank you for finding me again. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for never giving up on us. Love had taken 18 years to circle back, but when it did, it came home for good. Some fires never die. They just wait for the right hearts to carry them. And theirs burned brighter than ever. So if you ever doubt that love can survive the unthinkable, remember the girl who built an empire out of a broken heart, the man who spent 18 years trying to outrun regret, and the daughter who forced them both to become the family they were always meant to be. Love doesn't always arrive on time, but when it's real, it stays. Thank you for crying with me, laughing with me, believing with me. If this story touched your heart, do 3 things right now. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to remember second chances are real. And subscribe, because every week we prove that love messy, fierce, impossible love always wins. This is Mr. Cael Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.